what is this? This is greetings, having established by our examination that we can place special confidence in the skill and ability of Irving William Horowitz. We here do certify him as a foundation-trained Hubbard Dianetic auditor. And signed by the man himself.
And
who's that? Can't read
John Campbell Jr.
Who?
John Campbell Jr., the editor of Astounding Science Fiction.
Yeah.
And I audited him. I audited John. But anyway, I came up there to study for the couple of weeks, and they hired me.
Who hired you?
The organization in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Ron Hubbard hired me as a staff, what they called a staff auditor, which meant that I was working with people who walked in off the street. But I did get to audit John Campbell. I don't know if I ever told. Did I ever tell you about the story? Who Goes There? It was made into a movie called The Thing. Have you ever? Anyway, they made it into a movie called The Thing, which they made in 1951, and then they made it into another movie called The Thing in 1982, and the one in '82 was much closer to his plot. But the reason I'm telling you all this is that when I audited him, and now there is a memorial for people who write science fiction that comes out every year, the John Campbell Jr. Memorial Award, which comes out every year because he was a very smart guy. As a matter of fact, I think he probably had more to do with giving us Ron Hubbard than Ron Hubbard. But the reason I'm telling you all this is that I audited him, and this has been one of the things that was important to the people who are interested in the early stages of Dianetics. But when I audited him, I discovered that his mother had been an identical twin. And his mother and his aunt used to play games when he would go to school and come back and drive him crazy figuring out which one had stayed home because they were so much the same person. And Who Goes There is a marvelous. As a matter of fact, I now have the ability to make discs of videotapes. I have one VCR which lasts 6 hours with the 1951 movie on it, the 1982 movie on it, and in between are probably 3 or 4 episodes of Northern Exposure. Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
That was one of my favorites. So I have one 6-hour tape. Unfortunately, my discs only play 2 hours. So I can make. Do you have any way of playing a videotape?
Not anymore.
All right, because.
So go back to when you were hired by Hubbard.
Well, that's partly why they hired me, because I was a very good auditor. And I audited the guy who signed my diploma.
So what year was this? When were you
1951.
hired? Yeah.
So that part of what I'm telling you is that when they hired me, since then, lately, I have come to think, Jesus, I must have been good enough to impress them if they hired me. I'm using language they hired me because at the time it had never occurred to me to mention that. They just asked me if I wanted to stay. But Dick Wendell is part of that story, and if you're familiar with it, you'll be able to get the rest of it when I send you the written stuff. But
so you worked there. You started in 1950.
I was there in 51.
51.
But I worked there just for a few weeks.
Yeah.
They were running out of money.
Yeah. And
Elizabeth, New Jersey was charging them all kinds of fees and taxes. And they used to stand around after our classrooms and worry about how they were going to get money, because it cost me, I think, $500 to get down there for 2 weeks. And it was expensive for people to find the money to come down there. It was not a rich time. So that they were going crazy trying to find a way to run a psychology school that was getting bled to death by this town of Elizabeth, New Jersey for fees and taxes. And after we listened for a while, we would tell them, "You guys are crazy. The city is taxing you to death, and it seems to us it would be a good idea to start a church because they don't tax churches. Why don't you start a church?" They call it now Scientology. And he gave me a book. When I left, he gave me 2 books, pre-publication books. Ron gave me from his own hands when I was leaving, which were pre-publication versions of books which are now jewels.
Which books?
Science of Survival and Self-Analysis. Those are the no, those are not the 2 books. The 2 books that I give people that are beginning with me, one of them is Dianetics, because that was the one where he explained the best psychology he knew, which reminds me, I started to remark about this earlier. I have come to feel, and I'm going to include this in my book, I think, I've come to feel sad that Freud got so close.
Close to what?
See, what Freud found was conscious unconscious. But he didn't ever understand the ways in which they interact in the way that Ron did. And what he discovered, which is more or less the same thing that Freud called conscious unconscious, but which he called analyzer reactive. And if you've become familiar with Dianetics, you know that analyzer and reactive are the 2 interagents that determine people's behavior. And Freud was in the ballpark, but he never understood. And at the time I got into Dianetics, I'd been reading Freud and was impressed. I have a copy of Freud